Still have no answers as to what really happened to the Space Shuttle Challenger 75 seconds into its launch today. The liftoff and early flight of the Challenger was picture perfect until 1 minute and 15 seconds into its flight, and then it turned into the worst space tragedy since humans began blasting into space 25 years ago. All 7 astronauts on board killed instantly when a gigantic fireball ripped the sky apart. There are no emergency escape hatches on the shuttle, and with no warning, they simply had no chance. Small pieces of debris fell into the impact area about 8 miles off the Atlantic coast for almost an hour, and recovery boats and aircraft had to wait until it stopped before entering the area. That's a paramedic parachuting down, trying to find survivors. There were none. The biggest piece of debris picked up so far is only about 2 feet wide and 10 feet long. The search by planes and helicopters has now been called off until first light. The ships in the search will continue to patrol through the night. Only one astronaut carried life insurance. That was school teacher Christa McAuliffe. She was given a $1 million life insurance policy as a gift. She took it. It's going to be paid, says Lloyd's of London. What happened over Cape Canaveral today was sudden and surprising. Even veteran space experts had no inkling of trouble. Words from Mission Control and the Space Shuttle were routine through that first minute of flight. There was silence after the spacecraft turned into a fireball. Here's how it went.
7, 6. We have main engine start. 4, 3, 2, 1, and liftoff. Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
Now control. Roger, roll, Challenger. Good, roll program confirmed. Challenger now heading downrange. Engines beginning throttling down now at 94%. Normal throttles for most of the flight, 104%. We'll throttle down to 65% shortly. Engines at 65%, 3 engines running normally, 3 good fuel cells, 3 good APUs. Velocity 2,257 feet per second. Altitude 4.3 nautical miles. Downrange distance 3 nautical miles. Engines throttling up. 3 engines now at 104%.
Challenger, go at throttle up.
Challenger, go at throttle up. 1 minute 15 seconds. Velocity 2,900 feet per second. Altitude 9 nautical miles. Downrange distance 7 nautical miles.
Ground control did not know there was an explosion. The voice you kept hearing speaking was speaking what the eyes were seeing on the dials and gauges in Mission Control, not on what spectators were seeing up there in the sky. There could be Challenger off to the side. There's been speculation about that tonight. The solid rocket boosters twisting like out-of-control balloons off to the right side of the picture. That's what we saw today. When those pictures were put on television, that's what we still see tonight. NASA officials have no ready answers as to what caused today's disaster. At this point, information is still coming in to investigators who can only speculate about what could have gone wrong. The head of the shuttle program, however, quickly put one important question to rest at a news conference at Cape Canaveral, the question whether NASA tried to rush the Challenger into space before it was ready after delays had put the mission behind schedule.
There was absolutely no pressure to get this particular launch off. We have always maintained that flight safety is our top priority consideration in the program, and we look at the status and readiness of the systems based on that. We thoroughly reviewed the activities over the weekend and yesterday, and continually reviewed the status of Challenger right up until launch this morning. All of the people involved in this program, to my knowledge, felt that Challenger was quite ready to go. And I made the decision, along with the recommendation from the team supporting me, that we launch.
An investigation into why that safety program failed today goes on tonight, and it may be some time before we really know what impact it will have on the future of the entire space program. Suzanne?
Van, it was clear almost immediately after the shuttle exploded that there could be no survivors. There was a crew of 7 people on board, including 2 women. One of them was teacher Christa McAuliffe, the first private citizen to ride on a shuttle mission. McAuliffe's students in Concord, New Hampshire, were cheering and blowing horns as they watched a live broadcast of that shuttle launch. But the cheers quickly turned to shock.
From the flight dynamics officer indicate that the vehicle apparently exploded, and that impact in the water.
Some people were covering their eyes, and some people were just watching the TV set with a blank look on their face.
It was really quite dramatic. At first, you know, everyone was really happy, all these smiles, and then suddenly you saw a lot of people crying in the halls, and it was really pretty sad.
The students were sent home from school early, and tomorrow officials will have a counselor at school to help the kids cope with the tragedy. Other students from Concord, New Hampshire were at Cape Canaveral this morning, as were the parents of local celebrity Christa McAuliffe. The teacher's mother obviously feeling the emotion of the shuttle liftoff, taking her daughter on her ride into the history books that were so much a part of Christa's life. Lynn Scher reports now on how Christa McAuliffe came to her fate as the first civilian to ride a shuttle.
When she left her classroom behind for a semester of space training, 37-year-old Christa McAuliffe temporarily traded 12 years of teaching for a new kind of learning. Listen to her description of the airplane ride that simulates zero gravity.
As you peak that parabola at the top, you have about 20 or 30 seconds of weightlessness, and all of a sudden, just like Peter Pan, you start flying up, and it was just unbelievable.
That's the enthusiasm that's made her a favorite of students at Concord High School in New Hampshire. This is where the Boston-born social studies teacher lives with her husband and 2 children, and where she put together her winning lesson plan.
It's clear from her NASA application that Christa McAuliffe took special care to relate her classes here at Concord High School to what she calls the real world. Her philosophy of teaching, she wrote, stresses community activities. The economics class finds out how local construction projects impact the city. Law classes visit the local courts.
She can take very complex concepts and simplify them, but not water them down, and she makes all her students understand things, but in an interesting manner.
That's also what helped her application stand out among the 11,000 NASA received, and what changed her life.
The teacher who will be going into space, Christa McAuliffe.
When she reported to NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, she was poked and prodded and outfitted and observed.
She's a sort of a risk taker. She does the unusual, the way she runs a class, and she's not afraid of things. She lives life. She's not afraid of it.
Teachers are always prepared.
And while she taught history and economics, her students figured out there was something else on her mind, too.
Even on the quizzes, she'd throw in an extra credit quiz about what are the 5 names of the space shuttle, so we always knew her interest in space was high.
McAuliffe's crewmates have graded her well, acknowledging theirs will always be known as the teacher mission. And she hopes the lesson about space travel on the shuttle will not just be for youngsters.
People actually, adults have asked me, how many stops is that shuttle going to make? You know, bring me back a moon rock.
It's the kind of misinformation Christa McAuliffe wants to correct. And it's why the high school teacher from New England won't be watching the next space shuttle launch. She'll be on it.
The other Challenger crew members called it the teacher's mission. They knew McAuliffe was the media darling, but all 6 of the fatal flight crew were with her. They were stars in their own right. Judy Resnick was the 2nd woman in orbit after astronaut Sally Ride, and today's mission was her 2nd. With a doctorate in electrical engineering, Resnick knew she was qualified. Commander Francis Scobie turned to a dream of space after flying combat in Vietnam. He first flew the Challenger 2 years ago. His co-pilot, Michael Smith, was one of NASA's most experienced pilots, logging time in 28 types of aircraft. He joined NASA in 1980. Ronald McNair was an expert in laser physics, the 2nd black American assigned to a shuttle crew. His job was to operate the ship's mechanical arm with a spacewalking astronaut riding at the end. And Hawaii-born Air Force Major Ellison Onizuka flew on America's first military space flight. That top-secret mission was on Discovery in January a year ago. Gregory Jarvis was finally on the shuttle today after being bumped twice to make room for members of Congress anxious to experience space. His mission as an engineer was to figure out better ways of building satellites. Together, they leave behind them wives, husbands, 11 children, and of course, a nation of supporters.
A lot of reaction coming in tonight from NASA outposts all over this country, from Houston and also from NASA in the South Bay. People who have been involved in America in space starting to react now to what's happening. We want to switch live to Channel 7 South Bay Bureau Chief Rigo Chacon, standing by right now at NASA's South Bay facility in Mountain View. Rigo?
Van, the employees here first heard about the incident by word of mouth. They were already at their workstations by 8:40, but immediately after finding out, they ran to television monitors, as did millions of Americans, to see that horrible, horrible explosion. They would perhaps get more immediate information throughout the morning because of internal video lines throughout the NASA systems. They would get updates from Kennedy and from Houston. One of the announcements from Kennedy was from Jesse Moore, the Associate Administrator of Manned Space Flights, and he talked about the highest priority of the Space Shuttle program.
We always strive in every flight that we perform to be as reliable and as safe as we possibly can, and to do everything that we can to ensure that the vehicle and the systems are all ready to fly. Flight safety is our #1 priority in the Space Shuttle program.
You can talk about safety during a flight and in preparation for a flight, but after a tragedy like today, it seems that the tragedy is all everybody talked about. People came here to NASA, among them the wife of a scientist who, like millions of Americans, had trouble holding back tears when she heard about the tragedy in the Florida sky.
It's very terrible. I hope it never ever happens again, but I think the space program should go on and that we should find out what went wrong, tear everything apart inch by inch, find out what went wrong, correct the mistake, whatever it was. Maybe it was a fluke, maybe it was just God's will. I don't know, but I think we should go on.
It was elation that turned to heartbreak. It was to be a dramatic day for NASA. Many of the people coming here were excited. After all, the pictures from Voyager of the planet Uranus were exciting and unprecedented, and it was to coincide with the shuttle space flight. And after 19 years, almost to the day, they instead found that the accident that killed Chaffee, White, and Grissom almost 19 years ago today was to be followed by a horrible, horrible day this morning.
Okay, Rigo, a good measure of exactly what's happening there. The Johnson Space Center in Houston was the command of the Space Shuttle when it exploded today. And we want to switch there now. We want to go to Bob Boudreau, who was standing by in Houston for us. Bob, it's got to be a very bleak time right now there, isn't it?
Indeed it is, Van. One of the darkest days in the history of this space facility, which has known so many glorious moments. At this moment, everyone who is not participating actively in the investigation has gone home to contemplate the disaster that has befallen not only this facility, but in fact their neighbors. We've become so accustomed to the perfection of space flight with the incredible achievements of these people out here that there is a double sense of tragedy, if you will, the loss of friends and neighbors in a terrible, terrible accident, but also the lingering question of what happens to this program, what happens to the jobs of tens of thousands of people. In the short term, no answer is evident. I think the answer in the long term will be the same as we found 19 years ago after the deaths of Grissom, White, and Chaffee following the Apollo 1 disaster in Florida. I think the sights are again on the heavens, but as of this moment, the people here in Houston are trying to come to grips with the fallibility of being human.
The fallibility, and that's so true. When men made up of blood and muscle and that sort of thing start getting together with volatile things and very erotic kinds of materials, this thing can happen. Thank you very much, Bob.
Yes, sir.
Bob Boudreau in Houston at NASA there, where it's a very bleak night, as he was saying, for family and friends. President Reagan canceled his State of the Union address scheduled for this hour because of the Challenger tragedy. The President's State of the Union report is going to be broadcast 1 week from tonight on television. Appearing live on television, though, this afternoon, Mr. Reagan expressed his sympathy to the family of the shuttle crew members. He also vowed that the American space program would push on to new frontiers with future volunteers, including school teachers.
We've grown used to the idea of space, and perhaps we forget that we've only just begun. We're still pioneers. They, the members of the Challenger crew, were pioneers. And I want to say something to the school children of America who were watching the live coverage of the shuttle's takeoff. I know it's hard to understand, but sometimes painful things like this happen. It's all part of the process of exploration and discovery. It's all part of taking a chance and expanding man's horizons. The future doesn't belong to the faint-hearted. It belongs to the brave.
The President also said that this is what freedom is all about. We do it out in front of the world for the world to see. President Reagan, speaking from the White House, he has ordered American flags to be flown at half-staff across the country and overseas in tribute to the memory and the bravery of the Challenger crew. As we continue tonight, we will have more on the ill-fated shuttle flight today, a closer look at what may have gone wrong and where the experts are hoping to find the answers. America's top test pilot Chuck Yeager on why America should forge ahead in space despite the tragedy. And a visit with some Peninsula school kids whose teacher was almost picked for today's mission. That and more as we continue tonight.
No matter how you dress up a burger deal, it's still just a burger and fries. Introducing the Grande Meal Deal from Taco Bell. It's a real meal. 2 tantalizing entrees, a medium drink, and dessert, all for $2.89. Choose from 3 delicious combinations. After all, which would you rather have? More exciting burger box or more exciting food? Grande Meal Deals now at Taco Bell.
When you want to start an IRA, there's no problem finding a place to take your money. Banks want your IRA. Savings and loans want it. Brokers want it. Everybody seems to want your IRA money. But who can you depend on when you want it back? You can depend on Sears. Sears Savings Bank. All the dependability you've come to expect, now where you need it most.
Is there a way to turn plain chicken into an exciting chicken ole?
Sí, Ortega.
Or eggs into a Mexican omelet?
Sí, Ortega.
Or an avocado into a zesty guacamole?
Sí, Ortega.
Ortega mild green chili salsa is made the traditional Mexican way, with fresh tomatoes, onions, and fire-roasted chilies. Yes, for the taste of authentic Mexican salsa, sí, Ortega.
Sí, Ortega. Sí, Ortega. Sí, Ortega.
Now we want to show you what NASA is going to be doing as it tries to pinpoint exactly what went wrong and caused today's flight of the Shuttle Challenger to end in that massive fireball. One of the things NASA will do is this: compare shuttle flights, and we've done that with our split screen and exact real-time counts tonight. That's the successful launch of the Shuttle Columbia in '82 on the left, today's ill-fated flight of the Challenger on the right. We're using the audio track of the 1982 flight until the very end because both audio tracks are exactly the same. Let's listen.
Roll maneuver started. 20 seconds. Thrust looks good. 26 seconds. Roll maneuver completed.
These are exact.
30 seconds. 1 nautical mile in altitude. Throttling engines down to 65% now as programmed. 36 seconds. Flightboard status looks good. Mission control. 42 seconds. Columbia now 3 nautical miles of altitude. 46 seconds, coming up on grade, a maximum aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle.
A little more than a minute. Columbia now the separation of the solid fuel boosters.
56 seconds, pass through max Q, still looking good. Throttling the engine. Giving a go and throttle up.
It's differ.
Engines throttling up, 3 engines now at 104%.
Challenger, go at throttle up.
And this is the sound of today.
1 minute, 15 seconds. Velocity 2,900 feet per second. Altitude 9 nautical miles. Downrange distance 7 nautical miles.
The man who was voicing what was happening there was watching gauges and dials and not looking to the skies, because this is what the spectators saw on the right. On the left is what happened in 1982 at exactly the same time. Challenger at that time was poking into orbit, going into orbit later on as it continued to increase speed. The Shuttle Columbia went there today. Challenger did not. Now, that's one of the things NASA's doing or will do in the investigation into what went wrong in today's launch of the Challenger. Another thing it's going to do is look closely at the launch and flight frame by frame, instant by instant. So let's do that too. That's what we'll do here, not to try to second guess the cause, but at least see what they see. The Challenger launch came at 8:38 this morning, our time. The shuttle mid-flight roll maneuver to put the Challenger upside down went apparently as expected. 30 seconds into the flight, the Challenger engines throttled down to 65%. Now the shuttle is cleared liftoff and is in flight. We see the left solid rocket booster, the Challenger spacecraft, and the big external fuel tank in the middle. And in the circle there is where they think the flame came in the left booster. At 1 minute, 7 seconds into the flight, orders throttle up, and Challenger replies, "Roger, go with throttle up." We're now 1 minute and 12 seconds into the flight. Flames are spreading. The shuttle is 10.35 miles high. Its speed is now clocked at 1,977 miles an hour. It was at this point that the tremendous explosion of about 500,000 gallons of volatile rocket propellant in that big external tank blew up. Then there's nothing but fire with the two solid rocket boosters blowing free and shooting crazily through the sky. There's the last picture we think we saw of the Challenger. Bits and pieces fell 8 miles out into the Atlantic off the coast for 45 minutes before recovery vessels could enter the area and start the search that they had to go on. Now, in a three-dimensional look, let's just take a careful look here for just a second at a model that we have. And of course, everybody's been doing this, but it gives you an idea as to what happens here. This is the big external fuel tank right here that they have on the shuttle. It's 500,000 gallons of liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. It attaches to the belly of the shuttle. Down here, there are two conduits that feed the propellants into the orbiter engines here. It's the one that powers the shuttle itself. On either side are the two solid rocket boosters. They supply most of the power to get the shuttle off the pad and propel it during that first 2 minutes of flight. And then they separate, and they come off like this, and they're the only ones that are reused. Come off like this. They should come off easily. There is one. And then the other one comes off on the other side the same way, and they parachute down. That did not happen today. This continues. This did not continue today. One other thing that we're still trying to find out is where the crew exactly was on board the orbiter today, because there are 3 decks, the flight deck, the mid deck, and a bottom deck, and we understand that only 4 to 5 can ride on the flight deck. Normally in the beginning it was 4, today it might have been 5. That meant that 2 people were in mid deck down below. We're thinking those were the civilians that went on board, that they would not have the civilians up on the flight deck. But that's what happened. The crew was split up in some variation, and we don't know what it is. But that's exactly the way it went today.
So frustrating, too, to realize that it may well be months before we know what actually caused.
It's going to be a long time. And you know, there's speculation now that there were icicles hanging on the spacecraft 2 feet long, and there's a thought now that maybe they broke off on launch. That could have pierced something. It's very, very thin skin in some of those areas, and they simply don't know. There are other speculations that maybe some of the welds, these very fine welds, had water in them that froze and caused them to expand just enough to cause something like this to happen in flight.
But temperature could have been a factor, indeed. Well, as soon as we know more, we will let you know more. People who work closely with the space program know intuitively that what they're doing is searching for that next frontier, always facing a new set of risks with unknown results. This afternoon, veteran test pilot Chuck Yeager, the man called for being the man with the right stuff, shared his views on today's tragic launch with Channel 7's Tony Russomanno.
Chuck Yeager says the shuttle accident will have no long-term effect on the space program. It was Yeager's daring 1947 flight of the Bell X-1 that broke the sound barrier. The high-performance jet test pilots who followed and went on to become astronauts all seemed cast in Yeager's mold, though the retired Air Force Brigadier General believes the shuttle is not nearly as dangerous as those early test flights.
When you look at the results of the unfortunate accident that the shuttle had, it's really not a lot different than an accident in a commercial airliner or a military aircraft. You still have the loss of property and lives. And
that gripping sense of risk that people felt when they were watching the early shuttle flights go up hasn't been there for the last couple of flights.
You know, people have become more and more complacent toward the shuttle program because of the routine operation that the shuttle is associated with, and we also, you have to look at the shuttle the same way you would at a commercial airline. For instance, it's been operating that way, and we still have accidents with commercial airplanes.
The pilots seem to consider themselves to be test pilots, though.
Well, yes, the guys normally, the astronauts that work for NASA, the guy that sits in the left seat and the right seat are trained test pilots. Got a lot of experience, and they're used to being faced with unusual situations. Obviously, they aren't used to being faced with a catastrophe because you're only allowed one.
You are known as an extraordinary risk taker yourself. Not telling flight doctors you had some cracked ribs and full use of only one arm when you went on to break the sound barrier. NASA has been criticized in the past for being overly cautious. Now some people are probably going to ask if NASA was cautious enough. What do you think?
Well, that's Monday morning quarterbacking, and this always occurs after an accident, whether it's in commercial aviation or in NASA or the military. And consequently, I was not any more of a risk taker than anyone else. The only thing that I did is I evaluate the rewards against the risk. And in my case, when I was doing research flying on the X-1 or X-1A, there was no risk too great to get that reward of either flying faster than sound or up into higher speed. And I'm sure the early space guys operated under the same concept.
Seems that every time you add up the equation, it comes out flying is safe.
Yes, that's the way I look at it. And if you don't think so, you ought to take the bus.
At the Grass Valley Airport in the Sierra foothills, Tony Rusomano, Channel 7 News.
Yeager is one of the 12 members of the President's Space Commission. That's a group formed last year to chart the U.S. role in space for the next 50 years. And Yeager says despite today's major setback, they will call for increased commercial space projects in the coming years. Today's accident brings up the question of whether we should put so much emphasis on sending humans into space. After all, machines are capable of doing the same things humans are, that are at least done in space, and it's a difficult problem, and Lee McCarran is here to help us solve it. Lee?
And, you know, Chuck Yeager referring to increased commercial ventures in space. Those commercial ventures can be carried out oftentimes by unmanned launches in addition to the manned launches. There are many reasons for putting humans in space, and officials of the manned space program will tell you that the human body and the human brain in space can accomplish things that unmanned space systems cannot. But just as significant for NASA is the knowledge that Congress would be less generous in funding the space program if astronauts, people, were not on board. Congress people are like most people in this regard. They don't understand so well how much we get out of that other type of
Some money as well.
When Gus Smorenberg